and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories. We have stories that should thrill you a little and chill you a little.
It's amazing.
You will hear adventures sent in by you guys, classic stories from the pulp mags, and episodes from the golden age of radio. We have special segments like Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
That's amazing.
And the Paranormal with Jason.
I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
So settle in for the next hour and enjoy the show. Oh, and you just might want to prepare yourself to be taken away from today.
And now, a new 2.5-minute mystery.
This 2.5-minute mystery is being brought to you by Susan Brandworth from Miami, Florida. Susan wrote our riddle and sent it in via the story submission page on ronsamazingstories.com. Now, here is our story.
911, what's your emergency?
This is Frank's son. Mr. James has been stabbed. Get someone over here right away.
Freeze! This is the police. Don't move.
Okay, Sergeant, what have we got?
Pure murder, Detective. Anthony James was stabbed while in a closed sauna. I have 4 suspects being held, and one of them has to be the killer. Each swears they didn't do it, and here's everything they had with them.
The sergeant hands the detective 3 evidence bags.
We didn't find anything else in the sauna. Jack, a musician, took an iPod with him to listen to music. Steve, a banker, took a thermos to drink water out of. Patrick is a lawyer and had those sealed documents he needed to review before court. Max Devlin is a contractor and was known to have a beef with James, but he didn't have anything on him.
Detective Michaels inspected each of the items and then said, "Sergeant, I know who the murderer is. I've seen this before and he'll not get away with it. Have banker Steve held on suspicion of murder in the 1st degree." Now, how did Detective Michaels know who the killer was?
In just a minute, we'll have our solution. But first, a message from our sponsor.
Do you enjoy these 2.5-minute mysteries? Please let me know. Also, if you have one to share, I'd love to hear it. Go to ronsamazingstories.com and click on the Contact tab. And now, here is our solution. Did you figure it out? It was the items brought into the sauna. You really can't kill a person with an iPod or sealed documents. You can, however, conceal a knife in a thermos and simply let the evidence melt away in the hot sauna. Clever, but it's been done before. This 2.5-minute mystery was brought to you by Susan Brandworth. Susan works as a nurse at Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami, Florida. Thank you for your riddle and your service during these troubling times.
What's that you said?
Well, I have to say, welcome to the show.
Huh.
On the program today, we have so many stories that I had trouble fitting them all in. We have 3 stories sent in by you that all fit the theme of angel encounters. One of these is heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. Now, I couldn't stop with the angels, so I created a brand new
Johnny, is this true?
segment that tests your knowledge of the angel phenomenon. Our featured story comes from the pen of Dr. X. A listener reads us one of his stories from 1963 called Second Sight. This one has a twist that you won't see coming. We end the show with some viral news from the 14th century.
Ron, are there any more emails this week?
Why, yes, there is. We have this one sent in by Roadkill448. Sorry, that's all I know about Roadkill. Hi, Ron. I'm a trucker that spends a lot of time on the road these days. It's a very different world out there with social distancing and all. Each town has different rules and expectations. The result is, I'm alone a lot more. So I listen to podcasts, yours being one of my favorite, and pretty much stay in my truck. I love the paranormal, and I have to wonder if you would ever consider doing just a paranormal podcast. Roadkill448. Well, Roadkill, I have thought about that. The bottom line is I love the other stories I play just as much as the stories you guys send in each week. I don't think I would ever change that about Ron's Amazing Stories. I think what I'd rather do is have a second podcast dedicated to the paranormal and have it be more guest-oriented. Another thought I've had is to have more authors on the show. I haven't done that in a while, and I love talking to people about writing. On the podcast a couple weeks ago, Jason Dowd was here, and he set a challenge to us all. On the Horror Express number 19, we talked about David Larson's Marionette. Jason conducted a full investigation and then forgot all about the little guy. However, quite recently the doll came up missing, and he wants us to guess what may have happened to it. So please get your guess to ronsamazingstories@gmail.com or simply use the contact tab on the main page. All your ideas are welcome, no matter how strange. Jason and I will read your guesses on the air, and then Jason will tell us what really happened. So get your thoughts in today. Now let's get to the rest of the show with this message from Audible. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, computer, Kindle. Whatever you have, you can listen to Audible on it. So what am I listening to right now? We've talked about this one before, and it's been around since 1881. It is the original Treasure Island, narrated by Marty Ross. This is not just another reading of the Robert Louis Stevenson classic. Marty Ross has taken this to a whole new level by adapting the story to an incredible radio drama feel. It's complete with character voiceovers and even a rendition of 16 Men on a Dead Man's Chest.
15 men on a dead man's chest. Join in! Yo-ho! And a bottle of rum. Drink and the devil had done for the rest. Yo-ho-ho! And a bottle of rum. Yo-ho-ho! And a bottle of rum.
Now, if you're not familiar with the story, which I highly doubt, young innkeeper Jim Hawkins thought he had seen his fair share of characters until old sailor Billy Bones arrived at the inn. When Bones dies mysteriously, Jim stumbles across a treasure map leading to a stash of buried pirate gold. The audio performances in this one are top-notch. It's like watching a play unfold before your mind's eye. Truly a one-of-a-kind experience. Now you can have Treasure Island today. Here's what Audible has set up for us. They are offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you too can have an adventure unlike any other today. Thank you, Audible. And now it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
Well, again this week we have a collection of stories that follow a theme. Our stories are about angel encounters. Many people don't believe in angels, but just as many do. Either way, this is definitely a single category of the paranormal that just doesn't fit with the others. Angels are out there. What they are, I will leave up to you. Our first comes from heaven. Well, sort of. Maddie Pittman has written in many times before with her stories. This one comes from her past, and she has called it Parma's Angel. I was 10, I think, when this story took place. We were living near Parma, Idaho at the time. My parents had a small farm there where we grew corn and raised cattle. I had a happy childhood. We attended church every Sunday and helped the poor. My mom and I would take food and supplies to migrant worker camps every spring. One day, after making a delivery, one of the wheels came off our truck and we plunged into a ditch. My mother was badly hurt and I was left to find help. There were no cell phones in those days to call 911. We were on a deserted back road. I had no idea where, so I picked a direction and I began to walk. I was still in sight of our truck when a man walked up to me and asked if I needed help. He seemed to come out of nowhere. I remember I was crying and I just pointed to our truck and said, "My mommy is hurt." He picked me up and took me back to our truck. And then I fell asleep. I woke up in the hospital with my head on my dad's lap. My mom had broken ribs, a concussion, and a few bruises, but would be okay. I came out without a scratch. From what my dad told me, the man had somehow fixed the truck enough to drive them to the hospital and then completely disappeared. You can believe what you want about this story, but I know this was an angel sent to help us when we needed it the most. I remember his face was so kind and that I felt at total peace in his arms. Maddie Pittman, Texas. Well, Maddie, I believe you and I thank you for your story. I think this just might have to be one of my favorites. I have a few angel stories of my own that I've told on past shows. While I personally have not had an encounter myself, both my mother and grandmother have received help from kind strangers that simply vanish. Our second story is something that can be easily explained. Unless, of course, you are David Holcomb, a student from the University of Colorado Springs. David calls his experience My Guardian Angel. Okay, let's talk about the time frame first. I am a student at UCCS. I was 19 at the time, but my birthday was in March, so I believe this was in December 2017 or January 2018. I forget exactly. Anyway, I was struggling in life. I was very depressed and having a hard time coping. It was so bad I didn't even shower sometimes for weeks. I was skipping class and struggling to even get to my job. The point being, I don't think I'd ever wished that kind of depression on anyone. I had gone to the school counselor and it appeared that even he was beginning to lose hope in me. So you can probably tell I wasn't in a good place at all. Well, from Christmas I still had an Olive Garden card. I decided to go alone and just wear a hoodie as it wasn't very cold outside, even though it was snowing pretty heavy. I got to the restaurant, which is about 15 minutes from the college. I get there, go in, eat, and so on. My cell phone died while I was in there, so I was about as alone as you can be. Well, as I'm leaving, I notice my car is covered in snow. I mean covered. It took me 10 minutes just to get it all off, but the snow kept falling and covering the windows again. It was dark at this point and getting kind of cold. I was just about to get into my car when this black man walks in front of my car in just a small hoodie, same as me. All he said was, "Hey man, you have a safe drive." I smiled and said, "Ha, you too." As I said that back, not even remotely knowing this guy or anything like he was a friend of mine, I started to feel different. Look, it's hard for me to describe the feeling, but I'll try anyway. As soon as he talked, a feeling went through my body that was not necessarily happiness or sadness, just that everything was going to be okay. Period. Like there was absolutely nothing I needed to worry about in my life ever again. Just pure calm. Like everything became brighter, both mentally and physically. For those that haven't ever felt like that or don't know what you have, believe me, you will know. You know what the weird thing was? He was heading towards the front door of Olive Garden and then just passed through it. I ran to the door to talk to him, but when I got there, he was gone. His footprints in the fresh fallen snow stopped well short of the door. I felt chills, and brother, it wasn't the cold. I know it sounds like some random guy just wanted to wish me well on the drive home. But please understand me when I say I know that this guy was my guardian angel, or at least someone speaking on behalf of my guardian angel. I usually like to explain things like this, but the feeling I had was just as plain as day. There was no other way to describe it. I went back to school and am now ahead of the game, doing well and looking forward to the rest of my life. David Holcomb, Colorado. Amazing. I don't even know what to say about this one. I've heard of the healing touch of angels before, and it sounds to me like what you experienced were the healing words of an angel. Thank you, David, for your story. I felt it too. Our last story is sad, but amazing, cruel, but warm-hearted. I can honestly say I've not heard a story like this before, and it's not likely that we're ever going to have one like it again. It was sent in by Jennifer Mullen, and I'm guessing that she's from Boston. Here is Jennifer's story called The Construction Worker from Southie. This happened when I was 21. I had just started attending a community college and suffered a severe injury to my foot while playing volleyball. This resulted in me having to go back home with my parents to be taken care of. Well, they didn't, and my wound became an infection, and that led to gangrene. You see, my mother refused to let me take my antibiotics and actually barred me from going back to the emergency room. I won't say any more about that. My foot began to smell of death. So one night I snuck out of the house and walked 7 miles to an emergency room where they did take care of me. The nurse told me to go back to school because they were concerned that my mother might actually kill me. When I got back home, I called her. She was livid, and she cut me off completely. The last thing she told me was, "If you can't trust God for healing, then you're worthless, and I want nothing more to do with you." My friends and my therapist banded together to help me with food, bandages, and stuff. At one point, it looked like I might actually lose my leg, and they were worried that I could even die from the infection. As I lay there in my bed, all of the abuse and cruelty from my mom, the gravity of what was going on, being unemployed, and feeling very alone, well, it got to me. One night my foot was throbbing and hurt so bad that I walked to the NEMC from my apartment, and after checking in at their ER triage, I went out to the vending machines for a Coke. I got to talking to this guy, a big burly construction dude from Southie, and we swapped what you in for stories. And then I got called in. Later on, he found me in the ER where I was strapped to machines, getting antibiotics and painkillers. I remember vaguely that the EKG machine was going absolutely nuts. He brought me coffee from Dunkin' Donuts and sat with me until I was discharged. He asked me how I was getting home, and I said I lived close and would be walking. He wouldn't hear of it. He hailed me a cab, paid for it, and then gave me $50 because, "You really need to eat." I broke down into tears and hugged him. He closed my car door, and then I watched as he vanished. I'd been really looking for some kind of sign, some kind of something that would tell me that I shouldn't take my mother's advice and kill myself because I was nothing but a burden. I'm 39 years old now, and I still tear up when I think about this. He was definitely an angel, and I think it's kind of great that my guardian angel is a construction worker from Southie. Jennifer Mullen, probably from the Boston area. Jennifer, I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that, and I thank you for sharing your story with us. I would very much like to know how you're doing now. Also, am I right? Are you from the Boston area? It was the phrase Southie that tipped me off, and if my Google search was correct, NEMC stands for New England Medical Center. I do think your burly guy is an angel, or at least is working for one.
Johnny, is this true?
As you know by now, I like to surf the internet to find the strange and unusual. I do this in the name of the podcast, but the truth is, I would do it anyway, even if there was no podcast. What you're about to hear is...
Johnny, is this true?
I will tell you a story and then ask the question, did I make it up or is it true? Your job is to decide. Let's get started. This time we're going to take Johnny, Is It True to a whole new level. By that I mean angels. We will continue the theme here. How well do you know your angel trivia? If you are a biblical savant, you'll probably get all of these correct. If you're like me, then maybe not so much. However, there is a 50-50 chance that you're going to get a question right, so let's get started. Story 1. Angels are perfect beings. This has to be true, right? Nope, it's false. Angels have flaws just like the rest of us. Job 4:18 tells us, "Behold, he has put no trust in his servants, and his angels he charged with folly." Doesn't sound perfect to me. Story 2. So if angels are not perfect, how good are they? They must at least hold a higher rank than man. True or false? That is true. Psalms tells us this, "For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and hath crowned him with glory and honor." I'm not sure who David is talking about, but at least the angels rank over this guy. Story 3. We know that there are different types of angels. The very first recorded are the cherubims with flaming swords. Or were the archangels the first? Nope, I'm pretty sure it was the cherubims. Am I right? Yep, I am. According to Genesis, God drove man out from the Garden of Eden and placed cherubims with flaming swords to keep the way of the tree of life. Sad for us humans, but the cherubims are the first angels that we hear about. Story 4. Now, if you're an Indiana Jones fan, this one should be easy. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, then I'm truly getting old. The Ark of the Covenant's cover was adorned with images of angels. Is this one true? You can watch the movie for the answer. This one is very true. The book of Exodus gives us a description of the ark. And thou shalt make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, and 1 cubit and a half the breadth thereof. And thou shalt make 2 cherubims of gold, and set them at 2 ends of the mercy seat. Now, can't be any more clear than that, can it? That's it for this edition of Johnny Is It True? And it was brought to you by Gladys Goodies. Gladys Goodies are great treats for dogs and cats alike. They are 100% natural, and they are nutrient-rich treats that pets love to eat. You can get these and some really cool swag for your dog and cat at GladysGoodies.com. And don't forget to use our promo code RONS, that's RONS, to get a 20% discount on all of your purchases. That website again is GladysGoodies.com. Our featured story is something very unusual. It comes from the book titled The Counterfeit Man, More Science Fiction Stories by Alan E. Nourse. It was published in 1963 by David K. Publications. The copyright was never renewed and therefore is now public domain, which is why I can play it for you today. It was brought to my attention by Jodi Krangle. Jodi not only told me about this story, but also reads it for us today. And I gotta say, she does an incredible job. The story is titled Second Sight, and Jodi asked me to read the following before I play it. Note, the following selections are from Amy Ballantyne's journal, but have never actually been written down at any time before. Her account of impressions and events has been kept in organized fashion in her mind for at least 9 years. Even she is not certain when she started. But it must be understood that certain inaccuracies in transcription couldn't possibly have been avoided. The editor. Here is Second Sight, read for us by Jodi Krangle.
Tuesday, 16th May. Lambertson got back from Boston about 2 this afternoon. He was tired. I don't think I've ever seen Lambertson so tired. It was more than just exhaustion, too. Maybe anger, frustration. I couldn't be sure. It seemed more like defeat than anything else. And he went straight from the copter to his office without even stopping off at the lab at all. It's good to have him back, though. Not that I haven't had a nice enough rest. With Lambertson gone, Dakin took over the reins for the week, but Dakin doesn't really count, poor man. It's such a temptation to twist him up and get him all confused that I didn't do any real work all week. With Lambertson back, I'll have to get down to the grind again, but I'm still glad he's here. I never thought I'd miss him so for such a short time away. But I wish he'd gotten a rest, if he ever rests. And I wish I knew why he went to Boston in the first place. Certainly he didn't want to go. I wanted to read him and find out, but I don't think I'm supposed to know yet. Lambertson didn't want to talk. He didn't even tell me he was back, even though he knew I'd catch him 5 miles down the road. I can do that now with Lambertson. Distance doesn't seem to make so much difference anymore if I just ignore it. So all I got was bits and snatches on the surface of his mind. Something about me and Dr. Custer and a nasty little man called Aarons or Barons or something. I've heard of him somewhere, but I can't pin it down right now. I'll have to dig that out later, I guess. But if he saw Dr. Custer, why doesn't he tell me about it? Wednesday, 17th May. It was Aarons that he saw in Boston, and now I'm sure that something's going wrong. I know that man. I remember him from a long time ago, back when I was still at Beardsley, long before I came here to the study center. He was the consulting psychiatrist, and I don't think I could ever forget him even if I tried. That's why I'm sure something very unpleasant is going on. Lambertson saw Dr. Custer, too, but the directors sent him to Boston because Aarons wanted to talk to him. I wasn't supposed to know anything about it, but Lambertson came down to dinner last night. He wouldn't even look at me, the skunk. I fixed him. I told him I was going to peek, and then I read him in a flash before he could shift his mind to Boston traffic or something. He knows I can't stand traffic. I only picked up a little, but it was enough. There was something very unpleasant that Aarons had said that I couldn't quite get. They were in his office. Lambertson had said, "I don't think she's ready for it, and I'd never try to talk her into it at this point. Why can't you people get it through your heads that she's a child and a human being, not some kind of laboratory animal? That's been the trouble all along. Everybody has been so eager to grab, and nobody has given her a wretched thing in return." Aarons was smooth, very sad and reproachful. I got a clear picture of him, short, balding, mean little eyes in a smug, self-righteous little face. "Michael, after all, she's 23 years old. She's certainly out of diapers by now. But she's only had 2 years of training aimed at teaching her anything. Well, there's no reason that should stop, is there? Be reasonable, Michael. We certainly agree that you've done a wonderful job with the girl, and naturally you're sensitive about others working with her. But when you consider that public taxes are footing the bill, I'm sensitive about others exploiting her, that's all. I tell you I won't push her, and I wouldn't let her come up here even if she agreed to do it. She shouldn't be tampered with for another year or two at least." Lambertson was angry and bitter. Now, 3 days later, he was still angry. "And you're certain that your concern is entirely professional?" Whatever Aarons meant, it wasn't nice. Lambertson caught it, and oh my! Chart slapped down on the table, door slamming, swearing from mild patient Lambertson. Can you imagine? And then later, no more anger, just disgust and defeat. That was what hit me when he came back yesterday. He couldn't hide it, no matter how he tried. Well, no wonder he was tired. I remember Aarons all right. He wasn't so interested in me back in those days. Wild one, he called me. We haven't the time or the people to handle anything like this in a public institution. We have to handle her the way we'd handle any other defective. She may be a plus defective instead of a minus defective, but she's as crippled as if she were deaf and blind. Good old Aarons. That was years ago, when I was barely 13. Before Dr. Custer got interested and started ophthalmoscoping me and testing me, before I'd even heard of Lambertson or the study center. For that matter, before anybody had done anything but feed me and treat me like some kind of peculiar animal or something. Well, I'm glad it was Lambertson that went to Boston and not me, for Aaron's sake. And if Aarons tries to come down here to work with me, he's going to be wasting his time, because I'll lead him all around Robin Hood's barn and get him so confused he'll wish he'd stayed home. But I can't help but wonder just the same. Am I a cripple, like Aarons said? Does being psi-high mean that? I don't think so, but what does Lambertson think? Sometimes when I try to read Lambertson, I'm the one that gets confused. I wish I could tell what he really thinks. Wednesday night. I asked Lambertson tonight what Dr. Custer had said. He wants to see you next week, he told me, but Amy, he didn't make any promises. He wasn't even hopeful. But his letter, he said the studies showed that there wasn't any anatomical defect. Lambertson leaned back and lit his pipe, shaking his head at me. He's aged 10 years this past week. Everybody thinks so. He's lost weight, and he looks as if he hasn't slept at all. Custer's afraid that it isn't a question of anatomy, Amy. But what is it then, for heaven's sake? He doesn't know. He says it's not very scientific, but it may just be that what you don't use, you lose. Oh, but that's silly. I chewed my lip. Granted. But he thinks that there's a chance? Of course there's a chance, and you know he'll do everything he can. It's just that neither of us wants you to get your hopes up. It wasn't much, but it was something. Lambertson looked so beat. I didn't have the heart to ask him what Aarons wanted, even though I know he'd like to get it off his chest. Maybe tomorrow will be better. I spent the day with Charlie Dakin in the lab and did a little work for a change. I've been disgustingly lazy, and poor Charlie thinks it's all his fault. Charlie reads like 20-point type 90% of the time, and I'm afraid he knows it. I can tell just exactly when he stops paying attention to business and starts paying attention to me, and then all of a sudden he realizes I'm reading him and it flusters him for the rest of the day. I wonder why. Does he really think I'm shocked, or surprised, or insulted? Poor Charlie. I guess I must be good enough looking. I can read it from almost every fellow that comes near me. I wonder why. I mean, why me and not Marjorie over in the main office? She's a sweet girl, but she never gets a second look from the guys. There must be some fine differential point I'm missing somewhere, but I don't think I'll ever understand it. I'm not going to press Lambertson, but I hope he opens up tomorrow. He's got me scared silly by now. He has a lot of authority around here, but other people are paying the bills, and when he's frightened about something, it can't help but frighten me. Thursday, 18th May. We went back to reaction testing in the lab with Lambertson today. That study is almost finished, as much as anything I work on is ever finished, which isn't very much. This test had 2 goals: to clock my stimulus response pattern in comparison to normals, and to find out just exactly when I pick up any given thought signal from the person I'm reading. It isn't a matter of developing speed. I'm already so fast to respond that it doesn't mean too much from anybody else's standpoint, and I certainly don't need any training there. But where along the line do I pick up a thought impulse? Do I catch it at its inception? Do I pick up the thought formulation or just the final crystallized pattern? Lambertson thinks I'm with it right from the start, and that some training in those lines would be worth my time. Of course, we didn't find out, not even with the ingenious little random firing device that Dakin designed for the study. With this gadget, neither Lambertson nor I know what impulse the box is going to throw at him. He just throws a switch, and it starts coming. He catches it, reacts. I catch it from him and react, and we compare reaction times. This afternoon it had us driving up a hill and sent a 10-ton truck rolling down on us out of control. I had my flasher on 2 seconds before Lambertson did, of course, but our reaction times are standardized, so when we corrected for my extra speed, we knew that I must have caught the impulse about 0.07 seconds after he did. Crude, of course, not nearly fast enough, and we can't reproduce on a stable basis. Lambertson says that's as close as we can get without cortical probes, and that's where I put my foot down. I may have a gold mine in this head of mine, but nobody is going to burr holes through my skull in order to tap it, not for a while yet. That's unfair, of course, because it sounds as if Lambertson were trying to force me into something, and he isn't. I've read him about that, and I know he wouldn't allow it. Let's learn everything else we can learn without it first, he says. Later, if you want to go along with it, maybe, but right now you're not competent to decide for yourself. He may be right, but why not? Why does he keep acting as if I'm a child? Am I really? With everything, and I mean everything, coming into my mind for the past 23 years, haven't I learned enough to make decisions for myself? Lambertson says, of course, everything has been coming up. It's just that I don't know what to do with it all. But somewhere along the line I have to reach a maturation point of some kind. It scares me sometimes, because I can't find an answer to it, and the answer might be perfectly horrible. I don't know where it may end. What's worse, I don't know what point it has reached right now. How much difference is there between my mind and Lambertson's? I'm psi-high, and he isn't, granted. But is there more to it than that? People like Aaron's think so. They think it's a difference between human function and something else. And that scares me, because it just isn't true. I'm as human as anybody else, but somehow it seems that I'm the one who has to prove it. I wonder if I ever will. That's why Dr. Custer has to help me. Everything hangs on that. I'm to go up to Boston next week for final studies and testing. If Dr. Custer can do something, what a difference that will make. Maybe then I could get out of this whole frightening mess, put it behind me, and forget about it. With just the psi alone, I don't think I ever can. Friday, 19th May. Today, Lambertson broke down and told me what it was that Aarons had been proposing. It was worse than I thought it would be. The man had hit on the one thing I'd been afraid of for so long. He wants you to work against normals, Lambertson said. He's swallowed the latency hypothesis whole. He thinks that everybody must have a latent psi potential, and that all that is needed to drag it into the open is a powerful stimulus from someone with full-blown psi powers. Well, I said, do you think so? Who knows? Lambertson slammed his pencil down on the desk angrily. No, I don't think so, but what does that mean? Not a thing. It certainly doesn't mean I'm right. Nobody knows the answer, not me, nor Aarons, nor anybody, and Aarons wants to use you to find out." I nodded slowly. "I see. So I'm to be used as a sort of refined electrical stimulator," I said. "Well, I guess you know what you can tell Aarons." He was silent, and I couldn't read him. Then he looked up. "Amy, I'm not sure we can tell him that." I stared at him. "You mean you think he could force me?" "He says you're a public charge, that as long as you have to be supported and cared for, they have the right to use your faculties. He's right on the first point. You are a public charge. You have to be sheltered and protected. If you wandered so much as a mile outside these walls, you'd never survive, and you know it." I sat stunned. "But Dr. Custer—" "Dr. Custer is trying to help, but he hasn't succeeded so far. If he can, then it will be a different story, but I can't stall much longer, Amy. Aarons has a powerful argument. You're Psi-High, you're the first full-fledged, wide-open, freewheeling Psi-High that's ever appeared in human history. The first. Others in the past have shown potential, maybe, but nothing they could ever learn to control. You've got control, you're fully developed, you're here, and you're the only one there is." "So I happen to be unlucky," I snapped. "My genes got mixed up." "That's not true, and you know it," Lambertson said. "We know your chromosomes better than your face. They're the same as anyone else's. There's no gene difference, none at all. When you're gone, you'll be gone, and there's no reason to think that your children will have any more psi potential than Charlie Dakin has." Something was building up in me then that I couldn't control any longer. "You think I should go along with Aarons," I said dully. He hesitated. "I'm afraid you're going to have to, sooner or later. Aarons has some latents up in Boston. He's certain that they're latents. He's talked to the directors down here. He's convinced them that you could work with his people, draw them out. You could open the door to a whole new world for human beings." I lost my temper then. It wasn't just Aarons or Lambertson or Dakin or any of the others. It was all of them, dozens of them, compounded year upon year upon year. "Now listen to me for a minute," I said. "Have any of you ever considered what I wanted in this thing? Ever? Have any of you given that one single thought, just once, one time when you were so sick of thinking great thoughts for humanity that you let another thought leak through? Have you ever thought about what kind of a shuffle I've had since all this started? Well, you'd better think about it right now." "Amy, you know I don't want to push you." "Listen to me, Lambertson. My folks got rid of me fast when they found out about me. Did you know that? They hated me because I scared them. It didn't hurt me too much because I thought I knew why they hated me. I could understand it, and I went off to Beardsley without even crying. They were going to come see me every week, but do you know how often they managed to make it? Not once after I was off their hands. And then at Beardsley, Aarons examined me and decided that I was a cripple. He didn't know anything about me then, but he thought psi was a defect, and that was as far as it went. I did what Aarons wanted me to do at Beardsley, never what I wanted, just what they wanted, years and years of what they wanted, and then you came along, and I came to the study center and did what you wanted." It hurt him, and I knew it. I guess that was what I wanted, to hurt him and to hurt everybody. He was shaking his head, staring at me. "Amy, be fair. I've tried. You know how hard I've tried." "Tried what? To train me? Yes, but why? To give me better use of my psi faculties? Yes, but why? Did you do it for me? Is that really why you did it? Or was that just another phony front like all the rest of them in order to use me, to make me a little more valuable to have around?" He slapped my face so hard it jolted me. I could feel the awful pain and hurt in his mind as he stared at me, and I sensed the stinging in his palm that matched the burning in my cheek. And then something fell away in his mind, and I saw something I had never seen before. He loved me, that man. Incredible, isn't it? He loved me. Me, who couldn't call him anything but Lambertson, who couldn't imagine calling him Michael, to say nothing of Mike, just Lambertson who did this or Lambertson who thought that. But he could never tell me. He had decided that. I was too helpless. I needed him too much. I needed love, but not the kind of love Lambertson wanted to give. So that kind of love had to be hidden, concealed, suppressed. I needed the deepest imaginable understanding, but it had to be utterly unselfish understanding. Anything else would be taking advantage of me, so a barrier had to be built. A barrier that I should never penetrate, and that he should never be tempted to break down. Lambertson had done that. For me. It was all there, suddenly, so overwhelming it made me gasp from the impact. I wanted to throw my arms around him. Instead, I sat down in the chair, shaking my head helplessly. I hated myself then. I had hated myself before, but never like this. If I could only go somewhere, I said. Some place where nobody knew me, where I could just live by myself for a while and shut the doors and shut out the thoughts and pretend for a while. Just pretend that I'm perfectly normal. I wish you could, Lambertson said, but you can't, you know that. Not unless Custer can really help. We sat there for a while. Then I said, let Aarons come down. Let him bring anybody he wants with him. I'll do what he wants, until I see Custer. That hurt too. But it was different. It hurt both of us together, not separately anymore. And somehow it didn't hurt so much that way. Monday, 22nd May. Aarons drove down from Boston this morning with a girl named Mary Bolton, and we went to work. I think I'm beginning to understand how a dog can tell when someone wants to kick him and doesn't quite dare. I could feel the back of my neck prickle when that man walked into the conference room. I was hoping he might have changed since the last time I saw him. He hadn't, but I had. I wasn't afraid of him anymore, just awfully tired of him after he'd been here about 10 minutes. But that girl, I wonder what sort of story he told her. She couldn't have been more than 16, and she was terrorized. At first I thought it was Aarons she was afraid of, but that wasn't so. It was me. It took us all morning just to get around that. The poor girl could hardly make herself talk. She was shaking all over when they arrived. We took a walk around the grounds alone, and I read her bit by bit, a feeler here, a planted suggestion there, just getting her used to the idea and trying to reassure her. After a while she was smiling. She thought the lagoon was lovely, and by the time we got back to the main building she was laughing, talking about herself, beginning to relax. Then I gave her a full blast, quickly, only a moment or two. Don't be afraid. I hate him, yes, but I won't hurt you for anything. Let me come in. Don't fight me. We've got to work as a team. It shook her. She turned white and almost passed out for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. I see, she said. It feels as if it's way inside, deep inside. That's right. It won't hurt, I promise. She nodded again. Let's go back now. I think I'm ready to try. We went to work. I was as blind as she was at first. There was nothing there at first, not even a flicker of brightness. Then, probing deeper, something responded. Only a hint, a suggestion of something powerful, deep and hidden. But where? What was her strength? Where was she weak? I couldn't tell. We started on dice, crude of course, but as good a tool as any. Dice are no good for measuring anything, but that was why I was there. I was the measuring instrument. The dice were only reactors, sensitive enough, 2 balsam cubes, tossed from a box with only gravity to work against. I showed her first, picked up her mind as the dice popped out, led her through it. Take one at a time, the red one first, work on it, see? Now we try both. Once more, watch it. All right now. She sat frozen in the chair. She was trying. The sweat stood out on her forehead. Aarons sat tense, smoking, his fingers twitching as he watched the red and green cubes bounce on the white backdrop. Lambertson watched too, but his eyes were on the girl, not on the cubes. It was hard work. Bit by bit she began to grab. Whatever I had felt in her mind seemed to leap up. I probed her, amplifying it, trying to draw it out. It was like wading through knee-deep mud, sticky, sluggish, resisting. I could feel her excitement growing, and bit by bit I released my grip, easing her out, baiting her. All right, I said, that's enough. She turned to me, wide-eyed. I did it. Aarons was on his feet, breathing heavily. It worked? It worked. Not very well, but it's there. All she needs is time and help and patience. But it worked, Lambertson. Do you know what that means? It means I was right. It means others can have it, just like she has it. He rubbed his hands together. We can arrange a full-time lab for it, and work on 3 or 4 latents simultaneously. It's a wide-open door, Michael. Can't you see what it means? Lambertson nodded, and gave me a long look. Yes, I think I do. I'll start arrangements tomorrow. Not tomorrow. You'll have to wait until next week. Why? Because Amy would prefer to wait, that's why. Aarons looked at him and then at me peevishly. Finally he shrugged. If you insist. We'll talk about it next week, I said. I was so tired I could hardly look up at him. I stood up and smiled at my girl. Poor kid, I thought. So excited and eager about it now, and not one idea in the world of what she was walking into. Certainly Aarons would never be able to tell her. Later, when they were gone, Lambertson and I walked down towards the lagoon. It was a lovely, cool evening. The ducks were down at the water's edge. Every year there was a mother duck herding a line of ducklings down the shore and into the water. They never seemed to go where she wanted them to, and she would fuss and chatter, waddling back time and again to prod the reluctant ones out into the pool. We stood by the water's edge in silence for a long time. Then Lambertson kissed me. It was the first time he had ever done that. We could go away, I whispered in his ear. We could run out on errands in the study center and everyone just go away somewhere. He shook his head slowly. Amy, don't. We could. I'll see Dr. Custer and he'll tell me he can help. I know he will. I won't need the study center any more, or any other place, or anybody but you. He didn't answer, and I knew there wasn't anything he could answer, not then. Friday, 26th May. Yesterday we went to Boston to see Dr. Custer, and now it looks as if it's all over. Now even I can't pretend that there's anything more to be done. Next week, Aarons will come down, and I'll go to work with him just the way he has it planned. He thinks we have 3 years of work ahead of us before anything can be published, before he can really be sure we have brought a latent into full use of his psi potential. Maybe so, I don't know. Maybe in 3 years I'll find some way to make myself care one way or the other. But I'll do it anyway, because there's nothing else to do. There was no anatomical defect. Dr. Custer was right about that. The eyes are perfect, beautiful gray eyes, he says, and the optic nerves and auditory nerves are perfectly functional. The defect isn't there. It's deeper, too deep ever to change it. What you no longer use, you lose, was what he said, apologizing because he couldn't explain it any better. It's like a price tag, perhaps. Long ago, before I knew anything at all, the psi was so strong it started compensating, bringing in more and more from other minds, such a wealth of rich, clear, interpreted, visual and auditory impressions that there was never any need for my own, and because of that, certain hookups never got hooked up. That's only a theory, of course, but there isn't any other way to explain it. But am I wrong to hate it? More than anything else in the world, I want to see Lambertson, see him smile and light his pipe, hear him laugh. I want to know what color really is, what music really sounds like, unfiltered through somebody else's ears. I want to see a sunset just once. Just once I want to see that mother duck take her ducklings down to the water. But I never will. Instead, I see and hear things nobody else can. And the fact that I am stone blind and stone deaf shouldn't make any difference. After all, I've always been that way. Maybe next week I'll ask Aarons what he thinks about it. It should be interesting to hear what he says.
Well, first I have to say a huge thank you to Jodi for reading this for us today. Amazing job. The twist at the end was something I didn't see coming. See? Get it? See? There were many clues that Amy couldn't see if you were listening. But I missed every nod until the end reveal. Fantastic story. The author was Alan Edward Nourse, who is a science fiction writer and physician. He wrote both juvenile and adult science fiction, as well as non-fiction works about medicine and science. When he wrote sci-fi, it was usually focused on medicine or psionics, sometimes both. He mostly wrote for the pulp magazines of the time, using the pen name Dr. X.
Not so important times in history.
In this segment, we take a look at historical events that may otherwise go unnoticed. We look at history with a fish-eyed lens, giving a perspective that should provide no insight to anyone or any time. But it is historical, or hysterical, as the case may be. Join us now for this event in history. In this age of COVID-19, I decided to research the past great plagues of history. What I found was something quite silly. The plague hit in the 14th century, yeah, that's a while back now, and it was called Coromania. It was also known as St. Vitus's dance. It was a truly bizarre medieval phenomenon from Central Europe. It involved spontaneous and continuous dancing by crowds of people until they either collapsed through exhaustion or worse, died. Bizarre as it sounds, chronomania was regularly reported by eyewitnesses and was a genuine concern for authorities. It also seems to have been contagious. For example, in June 1374, one of the widest outbreaks began in Aachen, Germany, before spreading to other places such as Cologne, Flanders, Zurich, and later Italy. There were still outbreaks more than a century later. In Strasbourg in July 1518, a woman named Frau Toffa began dancing in the street. Within 4 days, 33 others had joined her, and within a month there were 400, many of whom suffered heart attacks and died. Because no autopsies were carried out, and because medical science of the day could hardly be described as advanced, only guesses could be made as to the cause. Perhaps it was some kind of skin infection or muscular inflammation leading to spasms. At the time, some people believed that the dancing was a curse brought about by St. Vitus, who was, according to Christian legend, a saint from Sicily. So they responded by praying and making pilgrimages to places dedicated to Vitus. The recovery of some of the victims further bolstered the perceived connection between the illness and the saint. How about that? You can read more about chronomania, the medieval dance mania, in the Christmas 2017 edition of BBC History magazine. That was episode number 441, and it was made possible by Susan Bradworth, Roadkill 448, Maddie Pittman, David Holcomb, Jennifer Mullen, and Jodi Krangle. Thanks, guys. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find any of the links I mentioned and how to contact us. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Clicking that follow or like button makes us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.